Thank you for checking out this episode of Wiregrass Daily News Sports. You can find the podcast over at wiregrassdailynews.com or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review, and I will read it on a future edition of the show. And if you just leave 4 stars, you are just a straight-up hater. You can follow me on social media over at pjordansec. You can email me at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com. What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Tuesday edition of Wiregrass Daily News Sports. I am your host, Phillip Jordan, in-studio host and producer. Nothing was football on 96.9 The Legend, and Auburn writer for Last Word on college football. Everybody joining me on the show today is Adam Spencer from Saturday Down South. We're going to talk all things SEC football here on the show today. And Adam, I appreciate you coming on.
Always a pleasure. Good to be back.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We were talking off air. We had planned to do some basketball talk on here a little bit, but we had to nix that because Sunday morning we all woke up to Jimbo Fisher's firing there at Texas A&M, and then on Monday morning we wake up to Zach Arnett being fired at Mississippi State. And I guess just jumping off, I guess it's not really a surprise with Jimbo Fisher, but when you win 51-10 the night before, you kind of don't expect to see that. But it obviously was something that had been in the works.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's not a decision, with that kind of money that gets made quickly. And, so I think that they've even said, this was a thing that was discussed last week, after a loss. But so I don't think he could have won 273-3, and I still think they would have fired him on Sunday. Just they just had to cross their T's, dot their I's, make sure that they had $76 million to give him, and because I think like 26 of that is due right away, pretty much. So yeah, and I mean $100 million plus when it comes to the buyouts of his staff and all that. So yeah, I think this was not a decision that was made following the result against Mississippi State, but it is still pretty jarring to see a coach who wins by 41 points let go the next day.
Yeah, hey, it takes a long time to move that $76 million around, so you could you get ready for a big buyout. Any surprise that maybe Bobby Petrino wasn't named interim instead of they did name Elijah Robinson the co-defense coordinator, but I'll be honest with you, as soon as it happened, I said, okay, obviously Bobby Petrino will be named the interim head coach, but they go with Robinson there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they made the right choice because my goodness, did Jimbo Fisher ever put together a trio of problematic ex-head coaches in Bobby Petrino, DJ Durkin, and Steve Addazio is there. So, I mean, you can't get much more controversial options. I mean, not Urban Meyer going to be there, and he's been in the mix in the rumors. Who else is going to be there? They're going to get Woody Hayes back in the mix here, after he punched one of his players. I mean, Bob Knight, I mean, RIP Bob Knight, but I mean, they just have all these guys who left their jobs disgraced and in the midst of controversy. So, I mean, Elijah Robinson is absolutely the right choice because, he's never been involved in a scandal like that, to my knowledge anyway. And, I just think that, you have to just get through these next 2 weeks. Like, is Bobby Petrino going to be the next head coach of the Aggies? No. So he doesn't need to audition for the job. Is DJ Durkin going to be the next head coach of the Aggies? No. Steve Addazio? No. So, I mean, give it to Elijah Robinson. Let him, let him show what he can do and maybe audition for, like Cadillac Williams did for a spot on Hugh Freeze's staff, like Greg Knox, who we'll talk about in a minute here, but Greg Knox, who is on his third stint as an interim head coach and his second interim stint at Mississippi State, let those guys take over, let them, build their reputations for future jobs and stuff like that. I think that Elijah Robinson was the right move. None of those other guys need an interim tag on them.
No. We all know all three of them are either going to be on Alabama or Georgia staff next year as an analyst anyway. So, there you go. Nick Saban probably said, "Ooh, I got some new analysts I can have next season."
That was Jimbo Fisher. Seemed like he was trying to. Jimbo Fisher seemed like he was trying to start like his own version of the Nick Saban coaching rehab clinic, but he forgot the part where you're supposed to like rehab their images and get them set up for future jobs. So yeah, we'll see how many of those guys make their way to Tuscaloosa to work with Saban next year.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see. We'll see. It'll be funny to watch. With Jimbo Fisher, I've never hit my feelings. I think he's an 8-4, 9-3 coach. You take away the 2 years he had Jameis Winston at Florida State. He needs to send some of his buyout money to Jameis Winston for making him as big as the head coach as he was. Because again, take it away, he's an average coach. In your opinion, though, why didn't it work?
He never got the quarterback position right. And I mean, for a guy who, he's just really never had the quarterback position right outside of Jameis Winston. Like you said, he's had good quarterbacks. He hasn't had great quarterbacks outside of Jameis Winston. Jameis was a great college quarterback. And I mean, he even had some years in the NFL where he was at least electric. He was maybe not consistent or elite, but man, watching him was fun. It was like 40 touchdown, 30 interception year or something like that. He was entertaining, but he never got the position right in College Station. Kellen Mond was a really good quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. Max Johnson's not an elite quarterback. He's a serviceable quarterback. Haynes King, even if he had been able to stay healthy, we're seeing now he's not an elite quarterback. Who was Nick Starkel was there for a little bit. I'm trying to think of who else. He's had some other guys there that just never, they were fine. They never really panned out. And I thought Connor Weigman was the guy. I was high on him. I thought it was such a shame to see him go down earlier this year because I had high hopes for him. But you got to get the quarterback position right. I mean, even now we were all down on Alabama earlier this year, and it was because their quarterback position was unsettled. Now they have a rising superstar in Jalen Milroe who's breaking records every week, it seems like, and we're all back in on Alabama all of a sudden. And so you have to get the quarterback position right, and he just didn't do it in College Station. You can bring in as many 5-star recruits as you want. If they don't work well as a team, and we've seen some of those guys transfer out already because they just, they were elite talent wise, but they weren't good team guys. And then combine that with not getting the quarterback position right, it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it is. It's just, all the talent that he accumulated there too. And a lot of these quarterbacks were highly touted when they got there. But like I said, just in the developmental part, like you said, developing these quarterbacks out of Jameis Winston just hadn't done it. You see all the names, Ruben. I remember as soon as I saw his name, I said, oh, Urban Meyer, is that a guy you could bring in? And then, of course, I've already seen people mention Lane Kiffin, which I'm sure Ole Miss fans are like, okay, here we go again. What do you think is kind of like, I'm not going to ask you to give out a name that you think could be the next guy, but just kind of like realistic candidates that could probably be in the running for this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that Lane Kiffin is crazy. I think Urban Meyer is crazy. I think those rumors need to stop. Lane Kiffin has openly said many times that he wishes he had more money for NIL stuff. He's said he wishes he had better boosters. Well, I mean, you can't do much better than Texas A&M. They're willing to throw around $100 million just to get away from a coach that they don't like. So, I mean, Lane Kiffin, I know he said he doesn't want to do this again with the rumors and stuff, but, that is definitely a name to keep an eye on at least. I won't believe that there's zero chance. I think there's a small chance that he goes. I won't believe that there's a 0% chance that he leaves Ole Miss for Texas A&M until Texas A&M hires somebody else. Jeff Traylor at UTSA is a good, safe pick. I don't think that Texas A&M fans would find that sexy, but I think he's done a heck of a job. Obviously Dan Lanning is a really good name. I don't know that he would want to leave Oregon for the mess at Texas A&M right now, especially with Oregon set to go to the Big Ten and get Big Ten money. I think that could be a big boost for the Oregon program as a whole, and Lanning might want to stay there. There's rumors of Kalen DeBoer. I think that those need to stop. He doesn't have the SEC footprint experience. He has no experience recruiting anywhere but out west. So, I don't think that he's a reasonable candidate. I think at this stage, any guy that comes into the SEC needs to have at least some connection from his past or where he grew up or just anything that anything that ties him to the SEC, and DeBoer doesn't have that. So, Lanning, Kiffin, Jeff Traylor's a good choice. Those are all guys that I would keep an eye on.
Just right there, and then we'll move on to Zach Arnett being fired on Monday. The Texas part of it, them coming into the conference, do you think that could actually be a deterrent for them landing somebody?
I think it's the opposite, really. I think if anything, just the money that Texas and Oklahoma are going to bring to the SEC, even more money, just the two conferences to be in are going to be the SEC and the Big Ten. So anybody who can land a job in those conferences would be, frankly, foolish to not do so. If Oregon was staying in the Pac-12 this coming year, maybe Lanning becomes a much more interesting and strong candidate to take over at Texas A&M. But with that not being the case, the Ducks are going to the Big Ten where they're printing their own money too. I think he stays put because he's built a pretty solid situation there in Oregon. So, we'll see how it all plays out. But I think if we're talking, I think they could poach pretty much anybody that they wanted outside of just a few names from, the remaining Big 12, the ACC, just anywhere else that they wanted to. I just don't think that you're going to get a Big Ten head coach to jump over, or I don't think that you're going to get a sitting SEC head coach in a good situation. Lane Kiffin would be the one that I would have in mind, but I don't think that that's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm sure if anybody that roots for Ole Miss is hearing this, oh great, we get to do this all over again if Lane starts getting mentioned again. And then I won't spend as much time on it, but Zach Arnett being fired at Mississippi State. You mentioned Greg Knox. He is the ultimate interim head coach. The second time doing it at Mississippi State, he did it at Florida. The first time he's not doing it with Dan Mullen, so I guess he's probably looking forward to that part of it. He's not following Dan Mullen, but 4-6, which I have not having Will Rogers most of the year obviously hurts. I mean, the offense was just not the same without him. But
it also wasn't the same with him, and that was, I think, the problem. I think that more than anything was the problem. Sorry to cut you off there, but I think
I was leading into it.
Okay.
Why it didn't work in that offense. That's you kind of jumped on my question that I was already getting ready to ask you, because that was my feeling. I mean, I know every coach wants to have their own system, their own stamp on it, of course. But coming in, replacing the late great Mike Leach, I felt like it was a mistake to change the offense the way that he did. I felt like he probably should have brought somebody in that had a background in the air raid. No one is Mike Leach. No one's going to call a game like Mike Leach, right. But try to stay as close to it as you could.
Especially while Will Rogers is there. I think, if you're going to change it, then change it once the air raid quarterback leaves. I don't get why he tried to change the system. Like you said, nobody's going to call the air raid like Mike Leach called the air raid, but you have an air raid quarterback in Will Rogers, and he's shown that he can put up huge numbers with that. And, Mississippi State showed that it could win, 8 games a year with that system in place, and that's pretty good at Mississippi State. Dan Mullen went like 10-2 one year, and that was like the best year that Mississippi State's ever had. Like, that's so if you can go 8-4 consistently, if you can make a bowl game every single year, if you can every now and then win 10 games, I mean, that's the ceiling in Starkville. I mean, Mississippi State fans might not want to hear that, but they're not gonna, barring like finding the next Nick Saban out of the blue, they're not going to become a dynasty team. They just don't have the booster money. They don't have the prestige. So, you settle for what Mike Leach brought to the table. You are thrilled when you get a Dan Mullen in there. But, Zach Arnett he seemed to just really be my way or the highway kind of guy. And when you don't have any head coaching experience, that's maybe not the best attitude to have. So, I think that he's going to be a hot name for defensive coordinator somewhere this offseason. Let's say Glenn Schumann gets a job somewhere as a head coach at Georgia. Let's say like Dan Lanning poaches or Lincoln Riley poaches Will Muschamp or someone from Georgia. Zach Arnett is a talented enough defensive coordinator that he could have success with a top tier program like Georgia, like an Ohio State, like a Florida, any of these playoff contenders, he would be a great coordinator for. He's just not ready to be a head coach yet, and he might not be there. He just might not be a head coach. I mean, you saw just the way that he came in and just completely revamped an already successful system. That's not a sign of good leadership.
Yeah, especially when you are the guy that was there. I mean,
Right.
it's not like you were a brand new guy coming out from the outside. You were a defense coordinator last year, so you knew what was there, what was working. So we'll see. We'll see how the Mississippi State goes about their coaching search. There should be some other coaches moving forward too. We may hear in this conversation, but SEC Week 11 on paper going in. Okay, these are some interesting games. We didn't have any that come down to the wire. They were all double. I guess maybe the best game of the weekend was the Florida LSU game. That was probably the closest contest. Just what were your overall takeaways from Week 11?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was more of an individual effort kind of week. I mean, we saw, I'll start with my guy Cody Schrader from Mizzou. 200 rushing yards, 100 receiving yards. Just every time he touches the ball, just runs like his life depends on it. He's awesome to watch. He's been just a great find for Eli Drinkwitz and that staff from the D2 ranks. Just incredible. Probably going to win the SEC rushing title this year. Just what a find that was. Jaden Daniels, man, I have him number one in my Heisman race right now. I don't care what LSU's record is. I saw something today. He's had 76 plays of 20 or more yards. Michael Penix Jr. is second with 57. So,
Wow,
so he has 19 more 20-plus yard plays than everybody else, and Caleb Williams is third at 55. And that's just insane how explosive of a player he's become since his days at Arizona State. And then I think I saw too that that's more 20-yard plus plays than like 130 out of 133 FBS teams combined. Like it's crazy what he's doing. So that was an insane individual performance. We talked earlier about Jalen Milroe. Every week it seems like he's setting a record. Brock Bowers coming back from his surgery and catching a touchdown. Like what a tough guy he is. So I thought Week 11 was more about individual performances rather than teams, because you're right. Like every single game was, when all was said and done, was kind of a blowout.
I know one game, of course, over at Last Run College Football, I cover Auburn, and I went in there. I thought Auburn could beat Arkansas if they play like like they've been playing. I did not see 48-10. And I mean, Auburn's playing a lot better, but that says a lot about Arkansas where they're going too. But on the Auburn side of things, what if you made year one of Hugh Freeze? You started 3-0, but it didn't really look that good, and you lose 4 in a row. Which I think if you go preseason, no one would have been shocked if they lost those 4 games. Just kind of how they lost a couple of them, and now they've won 3 in a row. Which against teams that don't have great records, but now they sit at 6-4. Will probably be on a 4-game winning streak going into the Iron Bowl after they play New Mexico State.
Yeah, I think that this is a really good job by Hugh Freeze. The previous coaching staffs would have, maybe lost the team a little bit after that losing streak, but they've stayed the course. And I mean, this is year one of Hugh Freeze. He's going to get the guys in there that he wants in there in the future. But finishing, even if they lose the Iron Bowl, and you never know what's going to happen in the Iron Bowl. Auburn always makes that thing interesting, even when they have no business making it interesting. So that's watch out for that game. But even if they finish the regular season 7-5, that's great for Hugh Freeze's first year. That's incredible. That's something that every single member of the Tigers should be proud of if they finish 7-5 this year and go to a bowl game with the chance to get win number 8. That's a building block, and that's something that should make boosters happy. That's something that should have people excited for the future. Then it's time, if you're Hugh Freeze, get in that transfer portal and find yourself a quarterback. Don't have this thing turn into Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M where you can't find your quarterback, or you find a guy that's just good enough that you have to stick with him. No, find your star. And if your star is not good enough, then go find somebody else. Do what Lane Kiffin did at Ole Miss and bring in, a veteran starter to push your incumbent if need be. Bring in 2 transfers to battle it out. Do whatever you have to do to find the guy, get some wide receivers in there too, because if you have a better quarterback, you need to upgrade this receiving core too. But 7-5, great work from Hugh Freeze, if that's what their record ends up being. Just even getting to a bowl game this year, really solid effort, and then you can start to increase the expectations heading into 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always wild when the Iron Bowl's at Jordan Hare. That's another thing.
Absolutely.
I'm telling you, being around a bunch of Alabama fans, they do not like it when they always get nervous when they go to Jordan Hare. It's like that place has got like the Voodoo Stadium. That's just all it is at Jordan Hare. And you're right. Auburn has won games at Jordan Hare, not just Alabama. They had no business winning. They just had no business winning, and they somehow were able to pull it out. With Alabama, of course, now they have clinched the West, and they will be playing Georgia, who's clinched the East. And I know jumping ahead a few weeks, like I said, Alabama still has to go to Auburn. Who knows? I mean, Georgia's kind of got a little, Tennessee this week, and then they have Georgia Tech after that. But just look, especially from the Alabama side of things. Is that a matchup too? Do you see as a close game as you look at it a few weeks away, where Alabama as a team now, you think, okay, they can compete and they can perhaps be that team to dethrone Georgia?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I think that the way that defense is playing right now is just, it's elite, and just something that any team is going to not want to go up against. I think that it has the chance to be a very similar style of game to what Mizzou and Georgia just played. I'm not necessarily comparing Mizzou and Alabama, but the quarterbacks are similar. Brady Cook can make plays with his leg and his arms. He's a very talented dual threat quarterback. Mizzou has better wide receivers and running back. Cody Schrader, obviously, we talked about him earlier. But Alabama's defense is significantly better than Mizzou's, and Mizzou's is a good defense, but Alabama's is at another level. So, you look at that, you maybe shave a few points off of that Georgia-Mizzou game, and I think that that's sort of the style of game because Georgia can play whatever style of game you need, and and we still have like 3 weeks for Brock Bowers to continue to get healthier ahead of that game. So I mean that's going to be just a lot of fun to watch, and I expect it to be really close, because I mean it's basically like an early playoff game. So those might honestly be the two best teams in the country. Nick Saban has a point every year. If let's say Alabama loses the SEC championship game to Georgia by 1 point, they probably won't get into the playoff. But I mean, if that ends up being the case, I mean, that is absolutely, you have to say Alabama is one of the best 4 teams in the country, and they'd probably be left at home, and it would probably drive Nick Saban crazy once again. But he has a point when he says stuff like that. But yeah, I think that we are going to get a really, really good game, one of the best games of the year in Atlanta on December 2nd.
And I just kind of wonder in the next couple of weeks, Jalen Milroe, of course, they're playing Chattanooga this week, and he has a big game against Auburn, running, throwing, and everybody's going, because it's flashy with the way he does it. Aside Carson Beck, he's put up big numbers, good numbers this year, but it's not necessarily flash number. He just does. He plays within the offense. He gets the job done. He's got over 3,000 yards passing. Just got to wonder going into that one, maybe Carson Beck's going to end up being the one with a little chip on his shoulder. So, hey, I know y'all talking about Jalen Milroe, just throwing a scenario out there, but, I'm pretty good too, and he's played really good this year.
Yeah, I mean, he just had a masterful performance against Ole Miss. I mean, man, they just absolutely dominated that game not from start to finish, but once it was like halfway through the first quarter and it was 14-14, and Georgia's like, okay, enough of this. And then, Beck and the offense took off, the defense tightened up. It was a master class for the last 3.5 quarters there. So I think that's sort of, yeah, I think you're right that like Carson Beck has that in him to have that elite performance. And, he's just never faced a defense this year quite like Alabama's. And that's going to change. But, he's talented enough to still put up some numbers. I just don't think he's going to drop 52 or whatever it was on Alabama.
Yeah, I don't either. If he does, maybe he needs to be invited to the Heisman ceremony.
Exactly.
If that happens in Atlanta. The final time we'll have the SEC on CBS for the SEC championship game too. But it's going to be fun. Kind of hope we can hurry up and get through week 12. I know you don't like to rush through the season, but this is always the worst weekend of SEC football every single year. But then we get the rivalry weekend, so it'll be worth the wait. But Adam, this has been a lot of fun having you on the show, talking all things SEC football. If the listeners and viewers want to check you out, where can they find you on the work you're doing?
Yeah, just check out Saturday Down South. We're hammering all the news on the football side. We're gearing up basketball. Saturday football newsletter is going to be important down the stretch. And then, I'm on Twitter at Adam Spencer 4.
All right, sounds good, Adam. I appreciate the time, and I look forward to doing this again sometime down the road.
Sounds good. Talk to you later.
Want a chance to see the Iron Bowl in person? Enter for your chance to win 2 tickets to the Iron Bowl on Saturday, November 25th. To enter, simply complete the form at 969thelegend.com. The winner will be announced on Friday, November 17th.
96.9 The Legend is your connection to classic country legends. But Digio Strategies has other options too. News Talk 103.9 is your source for America's top news and entertainment shows like Rick and Bubba in the morning, Glenn Beck from 9 till 11 a.m., and Clay Travis and Buck Sexton middays from 11 a.m. till 2 p.m. Sean Hannity, Lars Larson, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, and others fill your day with the latest news and views from America's top conservative voices. America at Night and Coast to Coast AM keep you company and connected throughout the night. Plus, Fox News, the Alabama Radio Network, and Wiregrass Daily News keep you informed with national, international, state, and local news. And with more musical choices like All the Hits 106.7 KMX, Today's Country 95.5 WTVY, and Music 107.7. Digio Strategies gives you more choices and more variety. Listen on air, online, and on our apps. 96.9 The Legend is just the beginning.
All right, once again, thanks to Adam Spencer for coming on today's edition of Wiregrass Daily News Sports. Now, he mentioned some of the highlights and the star players that come out on Week 11. Like I said, it was a blowout weekend in the SEC. Like I said, probably the most competitive game was Florida and LSU. And but the rest of the games were blowouts. Alabama beating Kentucky 49-21. South Carolina easily beat Vanderbilt. Tennessee lost a big one, big margin to Missouri. Auburn blew out Arkansas. Ole Miss, Georgia blew out Ole Miss in that one. Then, of course, the Florida LSU game was 52-35. But just kind of like some big numbers and some interesting things come out of the weekend. Jalen Milroe, 6 touchdowns in the game. Historically great Alabama game there for him. He was 15-22 passing for 234, 3 touchdown passes, 36 yards rushing, 3 rushing touchdowns. The defense for Alabama played great from start to finish. Alabama was up 21-0 for Kentucky, even got a first down. They shut down running back Ray Davis for Kentucky, who only had 26 yards on 12 attempts. He had 2 touchdowns, but still the yardage was not there. Kentucky, for their offensive work, they've got to get the running game going so they can go play action pass with Devin Leary and those young receivers. Last week talking to both Kevin McGuffey and with Matt Lowe, I said, we'll see if Alabama gets off to a slow start, maybe be an opportunity for Kentucky. It's an 11 o'clock kickoff. All that stuff. Alabama came ready to play in this one. Then, look, I'm not going to talk about Vandy at South Carolina. Rattler had a great game there. We touched on it that way. Tennessee and Missouri, I thought this was going to be a really, really good football game, and it kind of started out that way. Brady Cook with an interception, first drive of the game. So I said, okay, we'll see. Is Brady Cook going to have a bad game here? But, man, Missouri dominated this game. They were the better team from mostly start to finish, winning 36-7. That puts Tennessee at 7-3, 3-3. Tennessee's not the same away from Knoxville as they are on the road. I know most teams aren't, but there's just a big difference between Tennessee at home versus on the road. And then Missouri's now 8-2, 4-2. They have Florida coming up this week, and then you've got Arkansas after that. So great opportunity here for Missouri to get to 10 wins on the season. They are the second best team in the SEC East this year. They held Tennessee to 83 yards rushing. That was big in that one too. Tennessee coming in, best rushing team in the SEC, that 3-headed monster they have at running back. They stopped that, put the game on Joe Milton's shoulders. He's not Hendon Hooker. He can't handle that. The Tennessee passing game is not as good as it was last year, obviously, and they just struggled. And this is possessions for Tennessee in the game. They had 6 punts, 2 fumbles, and 1 missed field goal. So the offense was not there, and it was there for Missouri. Cody Schrader, epic game, great game for him, national televised game on CBS. 205 yards rushing, 1 touchdown. He had 116 yards receiving off of 5 catches. And outside of the interception, Brady Cook had a solid day. 18 to 24 for 275 and 1 touchdown. That one went to Luther Burton. Auburn defeated Arkansas. That was not seen. I picked Auburn to win this game when me and Matt did the show on Friday, but I didn't think about this. I thought it'd be a close game. It's in Fayetteville. Arkansas was coming off the Florida win, so you had to, felt they had some momentum going to this game. They were 3-6 coming in. They knew they had to win out to get to a bowl game, to get to 6-6. Auburn's trying to get bowl eligible, but Auburn on the ground. Auburn dominated this game up front on both sides of the ball, offense and defense. 354 rushing yards in the game, 6.4 yards per carry. Jarquez Hunter, who is playing really, really well, has over 400 yards rushing the last 4 ball games. He's playing really well right now. He had 109 yards. Peyton Thorne was 12 of 20, 163, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, 88 yards on the ground, and 1 touchdown rushing. It does seem like with Peyton, though, he does give you like the defense one bad pass where maybe you can pick it off. He did it the week before against Vanderbilt, and he did it here against Arkansas. I was kind of worried about that point in the game, too. Auburn's up by a few touchdowns. I said, okay, this might be what gives Arkansas some momentum, but Arkansas only got a field goal out of that interception. And like I said, dominate up front. That's been an issue for Arkansas all year. It's been their offensive line. The rush game was not even a factor. And then you get down 21-0, 27-3 at halftime. You pretty much have to throw the ball to even try to get back in the game. But they were able to sack KJ Jefferson 5 times. So Auburn's really playing well. New Mexico State this weekend, so they have a chance to go 4 straight wins into Iron Bowl. So they'll have a lot of momentum, and that will be a home game too. Then the big game of the day was number 9 Ole Miss at number 2 Georgia. Georgia 52-17 in this one. Ole Miss drops to 8-2, 5-2, and then Georgia's 10-0, 7-0. So the winning streak is still intact for the Bulldogs. 14-14 early in the second quarter after Quinshon Judkins touchdown. But watching the game, because Ole Miss likes to go pace. Lane Kiffin wants to go fast, up tempo, get a lot of plays in. But I was kind of wondering, the Georgia defense is going to settle in at some point and get some stops. So then you're going 3 and out, then you're putting your defense back on the field. And Carson Beck was awesome. 18-25, 306, 2 touchdowns. The running game for Georgia was there. I know for some Georgia fans, you look online that haven't been exactly happy how the run game has always been going this season. Kendall Milton, 9 carries for 127 and 2 touchdowns. DeJuan Edwards, he had 59 yards, 2 touchdowns. So your 2 star backs with 4 touchdowns. You had Bowers back in it. Georgia, 31 unanswered points. So Georgia really showed, okay, we can be this big offensive team throwing the ball. And like you heard me talking there with Adam, I really like what Carson Beck has done this year. I think he's quietly having a really good year, great year perhaps. And just because it's not really too flashy, it's just kind of just like he runs the offense. He makes the right throws. He makes clutch throws when he has to. He's had to in a few games this year. I always go back to the Auburn game on that. But, yeah, Carson Beck's played really, really well. He played well here as well. Jackson Dart came out of the game injured. Spencer Sanders went in. We'll see how that goes with them. Ole Miss, I think he's going to be all right, but we'll see how that goes. I will say this about Ole Miss. I kind of wonder, have they hit their ceiling? And I say that because this was a big spot for Ole Miss, and they played Alabama. Offense did too well, 24-10 in that one, and then here 52-17 against Georgia. So Ole Miss's offense is just going to have issues when they run into teams like Georgia and Alabama. And Lane Kiffin said it. I don't know if it was the Saturday press conference after the game or if it was Monday, but I saw it somewhere. He's talking about, hey, we just need there's better players. It's not against our players. We got to coach better. But, and Lane Kiffin's always talking about if he had better players. And we heard Alex Spencer talk about that when we were talking about Texas A&M. And then finally, the Florida-LSU game. Like I said, LSU wins this one 52-35. Jay Daniels. To me, and that last word we do a Heisman ranking. I didn't put him at number 1, but if I could redo it, I would. Jay Daniels should be the front runner for the Heisman despite the 3 losses. He was 17-26 in this one. 372 yards passing, 234 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns there. He had touchdown runs of 85 and 51. The 85-yard run was early in the second quarter to go up 17-7. And then you had the 51-yard in the third quarter to put them back in front, 31-28. And LSU never lost the lead again after that. I mean, when you look at his numbers on the year, 71%, 3,164 yards, 3 touchdowns to just 4 interceptions. So he doesn't put LSU in bad situations. I know he threw that interception to Alabama last week to kind of turn the tide a little bit before he got injured and had to come out of the game. But at the same time, that was a tip pass, not exactly his fault. And then on the ground, he's going to hit 1,000 with 2 games left. He has 918 yards, 8 touchdowns on the ground. I really hope he plays in a bowl game this year, but I can also see why he wouldn't. But I just enjoy to watch him play every single week with Jaden Daniels. So just hoping to keep it up these last 2 games of the season for LSU. And, of course, just some other stuff that happened in college football. We also like to talk about Troy and Florida State here, too, as well. Troy clinched the Sun Belt West, so they'll be going to another Sun Belt championship game. They defeated Louisiana Monroe 45-14. Look, Louisiana Monroe's not good. They're 2-8 now, 0-7. No shocker that Troy had their way in this game. They go to 8-2 and 5-1 in conference play. Gunnar Watson had another solid performance, 24-39, 219 yards, 4 touchdowns. His go-to guy here was Jabri Barber with 8 catches, 73 yards, and 1 touchdown. Kamani Vidal had a more quiet game, only 50 yards, but we also know Troy's record when he rushes for 50. So get that 50 mark, it's almost a guaranteed win for Troy. But the big thing here, the defense. The Troy defense was amazing in this game. 9 sacks in the game. Richard Jubinor had 3.5 with 4 tackles for losses, and Javon Solomon also had 4 sacks. Like I said, they clinched the Sun Belt West. Look at East, of course. James Madison has the best record, but because they're still in that transition period, they cannot qualify for the Sun Belt Championship game as of right now. Kind of had some interesting back and forth with some James Madison fans 2 weeks ago on X. But after that, you do have Coastal Carolina, who's 5-2, 7-3 overall. Then App State's got a 4-2 record, and Georgia Southern's 3-3. Old Dominion's 3-3. Georgia State's 3-4, and Marshall's 2-4. Georgia State was right there at the top, behind James Madison a few weeks ago, but now they're close to the bottom of it. So it could be Coastal Carolina again, which that's the team Troy beat last year. And then Miami and Florida State, always look forward when these 2 teams play. Florida State wins this game 27-20. I don't think Florida State played their best game. It was a kind of ugly-ish win. It's also a rivalry game. A lot of emotions involved. So I think you give a pass for Florida State in this game because it's a rivalry game. They do this against some other ACC opponent. You might, look at it a different way. But they do go to 10-0. They're 8-0. We're going to see this team in the ACC championship game. Look like it could be Louisville, but North Carolina's got 2 losses behind them. So we'll see how that could work. Louisville plays this weekend. They got one more conference play then they'll play Kentucky to close out the year. And then, of course, North Carolina's 4-2. Great win, great game against Duke. Overtime game. Drake May was the big plays in that one. But they're 4-2 in conference. So, don't know. Got to look back through it to see what the tiebreakers are there. But still, looks like Louisville is the team that you could expect for Florida State to play in the ACC championship game. They held off a late comeback from Miami. Did Florida State. It was 27-13. Jordan Travis, solid game, 19-31, 265, 1 touchdown. He was sacked 3 times and he had pressure. Now, there was a safety that Miami didn't get towards the end of the first half. Jordan Travis that ball was in the end zone, everything. That should have been a safety. I think Miami got done wrong on some points there. Florida State only had 57 yards rushing, and that really bogs their offense down when they become one-dimensional. They've had that happen from time to time this year with the run game just not going like you really want it would go. When their run game's going, especially with Benson and Travis also getting it going in the run game, they're really hard to stop. Keon Coleman, an all-out yard, hit a key touchdown in this one and a key punt return to set up that touchdown. So like I said, Louisville 6-1, 9-1 overall. That looks like that's going to be the team that we could probably see Florida State playing in the ACC championship game. The playoff rankings will be coming out on Tuesday night, tonight. And just my thoughts on what that could look like. Of course, with Michigan beating Penn State, talk about Ole Miss and their ceiling. I think Penn State has hit their ceiling with James Franklin. They're always going to be a team that's a good team, really good team, probably 9-10 wins a year. But right now, they just cannot get over that hump of Ohio State and Michigan. But I think Georgia should be number 1. Ohio State should be number 2. I would put Michigan at 3. Before last week, I would have them at 4. But now with that win, I'd bump them up over Florida State. And like I said, I'm not going to bump Florida State out of the top 4, but I'm also going to drop them down a little bit for the performance against Miami. Then at 5, I'd have Washington. 6, I would have Oregon. 7 Alabama. I'm putting them over Texas. I know they got beat by Texas, but just the way they're playing right now, I think Alabama would beat Texas right now. Number 9, I would go Louisville, and maybe controversial, I would put Missouri at number. All right, lastly, we do have the SEC TV schedule mostly for the last week of the regular season rivalry weekend. Of course, on Thanksgiving night, it will be Ole Miss at Mississippi State, 6:30 over on ESPN. Then on the day after Thanksgiving, on the 24th, Missouri will be at Arkansas, 3 o'clock on CBS. The 11 o'clock game on Saturday, November 25th, will be Texas A&M at LSU, ESPN. I'm not a fan of them playing this game that early in the day. This should be a night game, but oh well. Alabama and Auburn will be on CBS. The final time for the Iron Bowl on CBS. Vanderbilt will be at Tennessee, 2:30 on the SEC Network. Florida State at Florida will be at 6 o'clock over on ESPN. That's probably the game I'll be watching tonight. Georgia will be at Georgia Tech. That's a 6:30 on ABC, so that will be a quick. You can flip that one to somewhere else at halftime, probably. Clemson at South Carolina, always interesting game. That'll be 6:30 on SEC Network. Kentucky at Louisville is to be determined. So after this week, they'll pick where that one's going to go. I have a feeling that's going to be an 11 o'clock game, but it won't be on the SEC Network because it's at Louisville. So maybe ACC Network might pick that up. I feel like this will be an 11 o'clock game. That's kind of a gut feeling I have. I don't see it going in prime time, maybe 2:30 somewhere, but probably not prime time. But I do feel like this could be a early day game. And that's going to do it for today. SEC heavy show. Hope you enjoyed it. And once again, thanks to Adam Spencer from Saturday Down South for joining me to talk all things Jimbo Fisher, Zach Arnett, and of course, the week that was week 11 in the SEC. Week 12 is not great, but we're going to get into it later in the week with Matt Lowe. And I should have some other shows up this week too as well. May do an episode. We'll kind of do an SEC basketball roundup because that's going on with basketball. We didn't really get into it today just because all the football stuff I wanted to talk about. So may get out later in the week. Just kind of give you guys kind of an idea where everybody's at. But we're less than a week into the season, but still kind of give you an idea what's going on there. Remember, you can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. The podcast is available over at wiregrassdailynews.com or wherever you get your podcast. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. And if you leave just 4 stars, you're just a straight up hater. You can email me at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com. Check out my written work over at Last Word in college football. Everybody has a great day. Until next time. Bye-bye.